Alright, so I'm getting along with reassembling the transfer case. I think that's what it's called. But it's the housing where you have the gears that go from the PDL, that transfer from the PDL to the front differential. And I will point out a few things. So I put grease on the bearings, obviously, before installing this. Made sure this is nice and clean. I just went ahead and made sure this spins nice and easily. But the other thing you have to watch out for is the direction you put this gear in. Because, so you can see here, it says to rear. And this is the rear. But the reason for that is if you flip it around, it's going to be facing, the splines are going to be facing the wrong way, right? So just remember to watch out for that. Once I put this, so what I'm going to do now is I think I'm going to put it in the way it's in right now. So obviously you really need to tighten this really well. So I did that. And so I'll put this part in now. And then I'll put the PDL part in later, the gear. So I'll put this gear in afterwards. Once it's mounted on the truck so that this is not too heavy to move around and try to align at the same time. So, sorry, I just said something wrong. No matter how you flip this gear, it still faces the same direction, but I don't know exactly why one side has to face this way. I think that's just for the purposes of meshing. Not too sure why that is. They're the same thing, same bearing and everything on both sides. So I don't know, but well, just did what it said. Oh yes, one very important factor. Inside this gear, there's like this bushing here. As you can see on the original one, it's just full of crap. And then it's got these little holes, which are for lubrication. And in my case, on the replacement one, they were all full of crap. A bunch of black stuff that was hardened. I don't know if that's old gear oil or what that is, but they were all clogged up. So I had to clean that out. I had to clean the inside of this as well, of the bearing. They're very important. The inside here had to be cleaned out. As you can see, there's a space here, there's a ridge, and on the replacement one, it was just completely full of that black, hardened black stuff. It was like a layer of it that I peeled off, like a bunch of it. So, again, something to watch out for. By the way, I'm using the replacement gear on the original gear and the original housing. So the big gear that comes off the differential, I just call it pinion gear. That's what I call it. And it's got a different name. That one there. That comes off of the front differential. It meshes with this one. So, like I said before in another video, they're not matching. So that one on the differential is the original. This one was the original, but I put the replacement in. And shouldn't be a problem. They're the same gear, same part numbers. I do have a problem. That PDL part is not too hard to remove, but I don't foresee a problem. But I have extra parts anyways. The other thing I will mention is that this big bolt here, or shaft, it also has these holes. And over on the end here, the hole, it is supposed to go all the way through into here. As you can see on this part, it's actually seized up there. It's actually got a bunch of junk in it. So there you can see what I'm talking about. So on this one, I used a drill to clean it out. But this is vital because this part stays inside the differential. So oil enters through here and it goes into the middle of that gear and it lubricates the bearing, this big bearing. So if this hole is plugged, this bearing is not going to get lubrication. I wonder if that's what happened on that differential. And maybe these gears being big, they just seize and cause the differential to break. Possibility, but just make sure that these holes are clean and free of debris. I used a drill, and then I used a blowgun to really clean them out. Because again, any crap that you have in there that comes off, it's going to be pushed into the bearings, to the gears, and that's going to be bad. The next very important thing that I have to say, and this is probably the most important part of the video, is that if you look at the differential, again, this is the front differential, where that part, that PDL part is going to bolt onto here. But if you look at it, there's no through holes in the bottom. And what this means is these are two separate parts and they have to be oiled separately. Okay, so you have to fill the differential in, and this is the differential part. You fill it in through the back. You have to fill that in. And then you also have to fill the PDL side. And then I know there's these holes here. So this hole comes out through here, and this one goes way in there. And when the truck is moving, that oil is splashed around. It comes in here, falls down here, and comes into the PDL. But still, when the truck has been stopped, and there's no oil in it now, so you have to fill both sides in. And the thing is, if you were to fill just that one side, you wouldn't have enough oil because, again, that's on a separate side. There's no holes here. So I'm going to have to be very careful and make sure that I put in enough oil. And obviously, whenever I put gears in together, I put grease on them so that it doesn't dry start. The next thing that I will mention is that this gear going in, there's a bunch of this big piece going into this face. It's got a bunch of shim plates here, and this has to be correct in a place where this can't be too tight against the differential gear, but it also can't be too loose. I just left it the way it was. I didn't add any gears because we're really not, this part is unchanged. We're just reassembling everything back together. The only real reason why I removed these pieces was so that I could clean the inside, because there was a bunch of pieces of broken bits of steel everywhere. So that's the only reason why I had to disassemble this. So I'm not changing anything, but there should be just a little bit of play, and that's how much there. So this is not too loose and not too tight. And as I was saying, for the PDL oil, there's a separate fill plug for it right there. And once again, as you can see, it just has no real connection between this side and that side except for here. So this is what this hole matches with that hole I just showed you. And it comes through to the other side, as you can see. And it goes into that PDL assembly. Sorry, I just noticed I said this wrong. This is not the fill hole, this is the drain plug. This is the drain hole. The fill hole is actually on the PDL side, which is at the very top, which is that one. Chat, anyways, just make sure that everything is oiled separately. Alright, so I have that piece back in. There's the gears. I packed it with a bunch of grease. It's old grease, crap grease, I guess, because it's actually like Play-Doh now. But oh well, not a big deal. And as usual, I use some stainless bolts. So the next step is I'm going to clean this face up, and then clean out the PDL face, put the gear in, and I should have this done pretty soon. Alright, so I really wanted to use this housing. This is the replacement housing instead of the original housing. Number one, because it's still in better shape, although I did have to clean it a bit here because the PDL was catching against here. But it's still overall nice and clean. As you can see, this one's got 2 holes for oil, whereas the original one, as you can see, it only has 1 right here. I mean, it should still be fine, but as you can see, I had to clean up the original housing quite a bit more. But it shouldn't, I don't think it matters. It should still fit the interchange. But the reason why I'm using this one is because the plug fill hole is completely seized here. And unfortunately right now I don't really have the equipment to remove it. I don't have a welder. I don't have my torch set up yet. So I think we're going to end up using that other housing. But again, what I'm doing is at each step I'm checking for movement. I'm checking to make sure that nothing is grabbing too much, nothing is forcing too much. So just like for here, I'm just checking see both gears are moving. There's still that little bit of play. So checking this way, it's not moving that way. I checked it before I put it in, just this one when it was by itself. It's got nice free movement, no play this way. So everything should be good. I didn't tighten these bolts all the way because perhaps once I put that PDL bearing in here, it's going to move this thing, it's going to align it. So whereas if I tighten it all the way down now, so this whole thing still has some play, some adjustment, so it'll move this way and that way a little bit. So if I tighten the bolts all the way down and it's a little bit crooked, then once I put the bearing in, it's going to force that bearing in, and this has to be nice and straight. Although the shaft has quite a bit of play for that reason, but the actual bearing is quite a bit bigger and it goes into there. So sorry, the shaft doesn't really matter too much in this case. That's what I'm saying. But definitely want to just tighten the bolts down once the unit is in, so that it aligns itself. So once I clean the PDL housing up and clean the opposing face on that housing there, the transfer housing, I'll have to clean this piece up and put that one in. As you can see here on the back where that bearing goes into. And once that's in, then I put this in, and then we finally put the housing in. It's not going to be this. Is going to be the other one, but that's the same one. And put the drive shaft yoke in, and we're done with the PDL. So I'm going to end the video here because I think after this point it's kind of pretty straightforward. What I'll say is at each step along the way you have to make sure everything's clean. Apply grease to the bearings because the truck, after the truck has moved, it'll splash that gear oil everywhere into little pockets, crevices, and I think there's actually, they're designed just like this gear, there's that crevice there so that the oil stays in there. And so you don't want the oil to drain all the way down every time, right? Because then the gears at the top don't get any oil. But when you first rebuild it like this and everything's dry, you need to have that grease for the startup period, the braking, if you will. This is what the gear looks like on the original one, or the bearing. There's the gear, and this side got completely chewed up. So I even wonder if our problem started here. But anyways, so what else? Anything else I should say? I don't really think so. Grease on the splines, grease on the shaft. And oh yeah, and the same will apply to the PDL housing. You don't want to tighten it down, the bolts down all the way until you get the yoke in, because the yoke will center it. So you don't want to tighten it. You only want to tighten it down after you have the yoke in. And I may always make sure that it has some free movement, especially with that housing, the transfer housing. It's big and it's got a tight fit. It goes in crooked, and then I straighten it, and I made sure that it moves freely and nothing is crooked. Oh yes, I can't forget to put in the shift fork. So that's got to kind of come in simultaneously at the same time with this one. So I might do a separate video on that if it's a little bit tricky, but I think it should be straightforward. So you take the, I just put that shaft there just so I don't lose it, just so it's together. That's a nice habit that I have. But obviously we'll have to unscrew that so that this will go in, and then screw it back on once it's in. And yeah, I think I'm making good progress here. So hopefully this helps somebody out there, and yeah, you guys take it easy.